at a gas station. I just got gas now. I'm gonna.
Where are you going?
What? I went to a dam.
So I want to tell you something that's happening.
What happened?
The company called
What?
and said they're going to increase the insurance because you have way too much mileage.
What? What are you talking about?
The guy just called. He said it's out of control, your mileage.
Wait, what?
I'm
so confused. Wait.
Why are you in a dam with who?
What? Alone?
Why?
Wait 1 second. There's millions of people trying to pull out. Wait 1 second. Wait. I didn't. Wait. Wait.
Turn right on State Route 2A. Then exit right to State Route 2 West, Greenfield. Exit right to State Route 2 West, Greenfield. Police reported ahead. Continue straight for 6 minutes to exit 18, State Route 2A, Athol, Phillipston.
Does anyone in this room have it worse than their grandparents? Now, I've done this, I don't know, 100 times probably. Nobody has ever raised their hand. Nobody ever. If you live in the United States, you basically, the only outsider case would be if your grandparents were oil barons or something like that, and then they lost all the money, in which case the leftists would actually love that too, because it would show that accumulated wealth doesn't stay beyond generations, so they're all about that, right? So, but if you can do something like that, everyone in this room can do it, like, can everyone picture their grandparents? Do you have it better or worse? Does anyone in here have it worse than their grandparents? And that shows you that it's a perceived oppression, not a real oppression. That the thing that they're fighting, this patriarchal, postmodern, capitalistic thing that they're fighting, and they can't define it, so it's hard to define it for them, that it actually has bent toward justice always. And if you can plant that seed in them, I think it's a little bit of something. But it's very hard to break them out of that. But I think the key here is understanding that it's a perceived oppression. If you live in a free society in the West in 2019, you're not oppressed. You maybe don't have it as well as your neighbor does, and maybe you came from more and they came from less, or maybe you're sick and they're not, or a series of other things. But you've got a chance, and that's all you're supposed to have in life. And I think getting that through to them, as opposed to, oh, the system is horrible, and I have to now destroy the system, as if they could magically reconstitute a system that really would just be, in effect, throwing away thousands of years of human history. That they're so wise. They're so wise at 24 years old as they're shouting down speakers that they could build up what nobody before them could. And that's the danger there. So I think getting them to think about their own lives, where they come from, I think is a pretty effective way of getting through to people.
Well, we could also say, like, look, there's a claim that the West is an oppressive patriarchy. And so that's actually true. The problem with the claim is that it's not just an oppressive patriarchy. And there's a big difference between something being completely something and something being partly something. Because one of the things you might point out is that you can look at human history anywhere, and what you see is a complete bloody nightmare, right? It's death and struggle and privation and war and horror everywhere, with some progress, some ability of us to pull ourselves out of the mire, and the West is the same. There's plenty of catastrophe in our past, of all sorts, and I think it's necessary to know that. But then it's necessary to separate the wheat from the chaff. One of the things I see with readers who are unsophisticated and intellectually arrogant is they'll read someone great. Maybe they'll read Nietzsche, for example, and they'll find the odd thing that Nietzsche said that grates against their current moral sensibilities, whether they do that in context or out. And then they'll throw away the whole book. It's like, you don't throw away the whole book. It was Nietzsche. You don't throw away the book. He's like 1 in a billion. You read it carefully and you think, well, okay, no to that. But yes to this. And you do the same thing with Dostoevsky, and you do the same thing with Tolstoy. You do the same thing with the great writers of the past that have been passed down to us. You read intelligently. You separate the wheat from the chaff, right? And you gain wisdom that way. Well, you do the same when you look at your own history. It's like, well, of course it's a bloody nightmare. What do you expect? It's like, what's your point? We're going to burn it down and then we're going to have something better as a consequence? Well, not so easily, not so quickly. Maybe we read our history carefully and we think, okay, well, what did we get right? Well, what did we get right? Well, the sovereignty of the individual, that's pretty good. The fact that you have right to property, that's pretty good. You can argue about the limits on that, but you don't want someone just taking your purse. It's helpful that there are things that you can earn and own. The dignity of the individual, that's another one. The innocence before the law, God, that's a miracle that we ever came up with that idea. I can't believe that idea exists, because in most cultures it's like, well, you might be guilty? Okay, you're dead. Because, well, that's easier. You might be guilty. Why go through all the trouble? There's plenty of people where you came from. It's like the trouble of presuming your innocence. It's innocent. It's even hard for you to do that for yourself. And the idea that each person has an intrinsic worth regardless of their, externalities, let's say. That's another idea. That's a complete miracle. It's like, well, what are we going to do? We're going to throw all that away with the statement that we live in an oppressive patriarchy. And then we're going to be left with nothing. And what good is that? Well, how about we look at our history and we take responsibility for it? We think, okay, well, here's some things that need to be fixed. There's plenty of them, right? There's plenty of them for each of us to fix. And we'll go fix them. And maybe then we can atone for the bloodiness of our history and for our so-called unearned privilege, some of which all of us have. And that would be good. That would be part of the adventure of your life too. And that's a far more sensible and wise approach to the diagnosis of what's wrong with the West than, well, it's an oppressive patriarchy and it should be overthrown, or whatever the current low resolution and resentful ideology happens to be. And there's something to be said for a bit of humility as well. It's like, really, you really think that you're capable of making large-scale social transformations and getting it right, do you? You really think that? You're 25, you're 30, you're 40, I don't care, What makes you think you're smart enough to pull off something like that? It's very, very difficult, very, very, very difficult to take a system that works not too badly and to do anything to it that doesn't make it worse, much less to radically
In half a mile, use the right lane to exit right to exit 18, State Route 2A, Athol, Phillipston. Then keep left.
Instituted and make it better. That's really hard. So, if you're upset about your culture, well, maybe you could think of some small ways that are local that you could go out and improve it. Well, I think you should start with yourself. Because, then you're only harming yourself and you're not a bad person to practice on. And then you could extend that to your family. Well, at least you suffer for the consequences.
Exit right to exit 18, State Route 2A, Athol, Phillipston. Then keep left to State Route 2A.
Of your own experiments that way, rather than having someone else do it. And then maybe you can work on bringing a little more harmony into your family. And maybe you can get a job and see if you're any good at that. And then if you manage those three things halfways respectably,
keep left, then turn left on State Route 2A.
Well, then you could dare to put a toehold out into the broader community and think, maybe I have an idea here that we could tentatively
turn left on State Route 2A.
Attempt that might make some small thing slightly better that we could measure carefully and assess. And that would be your contribution. And maybe you get real good at that, so by the time you're 50 or 60 and you have a solid life behind you, you're actually capable of generating large-scale improvements carefully.
As you were saying that, I was thinking, this is exactly what Alex...
In 2.4 miles, turn right on Chestnut Hill Avenue.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is. I mean, this is a bartender with a 430 credit score, which is pretty terrible. But all she's ever done in her life has been a bartender. Now, that's fine. I've been a bartender at times. But her only accomplishment is becoming a congresswoman with, I think, around 15,000 votes by saying the exact thing that the media wants you to say all the time, right? The idea that she could write this Green New Deal and that somehow she is the one that can. Now, of course, she didn't really write it. We don't know who really wrote it. But the idea that she could present this as if she has the ideas that could rejigger the entire United States economy and how we deal with energy and transportation and everything, and we're not going to have planes, and we're going to pay people unwilling to work. Although then she deleted that part and put that. It's like it's the lack of humility there that's actually staggering. That she thinks no one before her might have tried to move some of these things on the margins a little bit, but the crazy part
or that moving things on the margins isn't enough.
Well, they don't believe it's enough. But the really crazy part of this is that pretty much, I think the 5 or 6 Democratic candidates that we have now have all basically signed on board this thing.
Yeah.
This thing, which is I think you could probably argue that it's unconstitutional on the grounds of it's just taking more for the government.
But it defies everything we know from history about how economics really
Yeah.
works.
Well, she's admitted you can't
Complete
pay
denial of history.
Yeah. She says we'll tax the billionaires, and then she also tells you that the billionaires are the blight on society. So it's like, well, which one is it?
Right.
Because you need the billionaires to pay for it, even though it won't pay for it. And if you don't want billionaires, well, now we can't pay for it. So what are we doing? Give me one.
Australia's longest-serving Prime Minister was a man called Bob Menzies, and he was a man of incredibly powerful intellect and very, very deep learning. And he wrote, fascinatingly, that democracy is not a machine, it's a spirit, in which the peculiar Christian conception that no matter what your station in life is, each of us has a spark of the divine, and every soul is of equal value before heaven. Why do I mention that? Partly because I think it's a very relevant point personally, but it's because in the mocking and the ridiculing of that respect for our faith out of the door, we've knocked out one of the pillars of democracy. We've knocked out the idea that whether I agree with you or not doesn't matter. I have to respect you because a higher authority places as much value on you as he does on me. Now it seems that the problem is that if you dare disagree with me, I don't have a reference
In 1,000 feet, turn right.
frame for good and bad anymore, or for respecting you. Therefore, I have to insist I'm right. See, I'm God over my life, and you dare to challenge me because you want to be God over yours.
Well, that's the
So
problem.
you're an evil person, or you're a racist, or you're
Turn right on Chestnut Hill Avenue.
something terrible. We lack a framework for respecting one another, and it seems a massive problem for us.
Well, it's the problem with the collectivist viewpoint. Because if your defining characteristic is that you're a member of a collective, then you live or die by the propriety of the collective. The
In 4.1 miles, keep left to Downhill Road.
antidote to that is that strange metaphysical claim, which is that, well, which is fundamentally that we each have a spark of the divine in us. You think, well, it's easy to be cynical about that, but you shouldn't be, because you act like it's true. And that's worth noticing. It's like if you have friends or family members and you don't treat them like they have profound intrinsic value, then they're not happy with you. right? You can't have a loving relationship without that. You can't have a relationship of reciprocity without that. You can't have a relationship of respect without that. None of it. And they also want you to treat them like they're, in some sense, masters of their own destiny, which is also interesting, right? Because if you have say a 21-year-old child, and they're upset with you, they say, well, I'm 21 years old, I'm able to make my own decisions. And you say, and they want you to agree with that, and you want to agree with it because you hope that they're all ready to make their own decisions. And you think, well, maybe they have matured to that point. So what are you saying? Well, you're saying that they are gifted with the ability to take the responsibility to shape the reality around them. And they insist upon that. They insist upon you recognizing that in them as a hallmark of respect and love. And you might be irritated because they're not acting responsibly enough to deserve that, but it's still what you hope for and want. And so, well, so what is it? We're the sovereign cornerstone of the state, each of us. Are we going to dispute that? Well, we know the cost of that. Okay, well, do we have that spark of divinity? Well, what do we struggle with day to day? We struggle with the potential that's in front of us and transforming that into the reality that could be. That's as close to a divine faculty as anything I can think of. It's completely mysterious that we can wrestle with the fabric of becoming and turn it into the actuality of being. And that we seem to do that as a consequence of our ethical choices, right? You make bad choices, you think they're bad, bad things happen, right? And you think they're bad. And so you took the potential that was there in front of you and you made something bad of it. You can do that. And you can also do what's good. And we know that of each other. And that's part of the reason that we're granted, let's say, the right and the responsibility of being the cornerstone of the state. And so the idea that there is that divinity in us, I think that's associated with our consciousness, whatever that is. Because consciousness is a mystery. It seems to give reality to being, right? What's being without consciousness? There's no one there to perceive anything. There's no one there to shape anything. It's like, is there anything there? Well, our consciousness itself seems to be what participates in the reality of being and the transformation of potential into actuality, for better or for worse. So there's an ethical domain to it too. It's like there's no reason for us to be questioning this fundamental assumption unless we think we have a better theory. What is that? Well, it's your race. It's your power structure. It's like, that's what you want? You want to be judged by collective standards? It doesn't matter what you did. It's in this foreword I wrote for the Solzhenitsyn book. The people who ran the magazine Red Terror, that's a hell of a magazine, Red Terror. So they said, well, look, if you're getting rid of the bourgeoisie, don't just be stopping with the people who own businesses. You want to get rid of their children, too, because they're infected with the same damn evil spirit. And just to be on the safe side, how about you take out the grandchildren, too? 6-year-old, 10-year-old, doesn't matter. Everyone goes. And what happened in the Soviet Union, everyone judged on their collective identity, right? That's how you're going to be judged. I'll find something about your collective identity that's not so positive, right? Some manner in which, regardless of how oppressed you are, you're also an oppressor. For you, it might be you're male. Well, that would do it, For you, it might be that you're middle class. I can find some dimension of your multiple collective identities on which you're an oppressor. And that's good enough to do you in, if you take the collectivist route. And the alternative to that is no. We have that spark of divinity. It's associated with a deep, deep responsibility. And it's
In 1,000 feet, keep left. Keep left to Downhill Road.